You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast, brought to you by the patrons of Missed Apex Podcast. Today's episode is called The Wind Did It. I'm your host, Richard Spanners Ready, and I'm joined by Matt Two Rumpets. How's it going there, Matt?
Oh, it's going pretty good. How about yourself, Spanners?
Yeah, going well. Just recovering from quite a hectic weekend, some self-inflicted wounds, and I did in fact miss the start of the Grand Prix. They say it starts at 10 o'clock for the qualifying, so you assume the start time is going to be somewhere close to that, not 2 hours earlier.
Yeah, I think Malaysia is a bit of a special case, but you'll be happy to know that I actually had to get out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning in order to see the start. So at least one of us managed to be a responsible grown-up.
That does make me feel better that you had to suffer in some way. But Matt, it really was a turn-up for the books. A new winner in 2017 in the form of Max Verstappen, and it looks like more than a flash in the pan. I'm calling it Red Bull are back.
Yeah, and I think they really are, because this was not, throughout the rest of the season, a track like this would see them a distant 5th and 6th, assuming the top two teams had all of their parts intact. And they were properly racy all weekend. And, obviously Verstappen won. The interesting question really wasn't Red Bull versus Mercedes. It would have been Red Bull versus Vettel. And we did not get to see that, unfortunately.
No, but we are an independent podcast hosted by MissedApexPodcast.com. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute, and we are the world's 2nd to 10th best sports podcast this year. This show is safe for work. We're keeping it clean here, so you can play this with kids in the background or at work. We have commentator and host of Raise the Roof on Downforce Radio, Alex Goldschmidt. How's it going, Alex?
Evening, Spanners. Evening, everybody. Yeah, all good. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for subbing in at the last minute after Jake Sanson let us down terribly.
And I've now got an official hashtag for that. Hashtag blame Sanson.
And also Ryan Ferris is here. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing great, thanks. So, I was up till 2 o'clock this morning, didn't go to bed till that time, thinking that we were getting up at 10 o'clock for the race, and then realised that it was actually 8 o'clock.
You made the same mistake as me. I made that exact same mistake and missed the start of the race, but it doesn't matter. For you, you are young, you have limitless time. I had to fit it in, like on my phone, in between activities. All right, let's go on to the weekend's activities. Well, Matt, general impressions of the race and of qualifying. Sadly, this is the last, or they've stated it's the last, Malaysian Grand Prix. It's a track that I think everybody is going to miss. We usually get good action. It's not one of the ones we'd have chosen to lose, and it's probably the toughest Grand Prix on the circuit as well. So I'm still holding out hope that we will come back here, but for now we've got to assume that that is the end of the Malaysian Grand Prix.
Yeah, and it's probably in for a while, but at least on the Sky broadcast, they were saying that the organizer of the Singapore Grand Prix was saying, well, it might be more on hiatus than forever one and done, as it were. And I agree with you. Let's hope so. It's a fun track. It's a good track. The racing oftentimes is interesting. And it's sort of a great place. I think a lot of the teams enjoy going there. A lot of important stuff has happened over the past, 18 years it's been on the calendar? 15 years? Somebody who knows more than me. Feel free to speak up.
But it's kind of been there alongside this kind of new era of Formula One tracks. And personally, I know a lot of people hate the Tilkodromes, and they've certainly got their flaws. But sometimes we're at these kind of tracks and you go, Formula One cars suit and fit these kind of tracks. You go to somewhere like Monaco, Hungary, Barcelona, as much as I love Barcelona, and you go, yeah, the modern F1 cars, these tracks weren't designed for them. But having the tracks that are designed for them in this era, I haven't felt is a terrible thing. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because you've got the odd Abu Dhabi doesn't mean you want to get rid of Bahrain and Malaysia as well.
Yeah, it's true. You want to be able to keep the tracks that promote good racing. But the issue with Malaysia is I think partially they've lost government support, and no one can really afford to put on a Grand Prix without government support. And also they haven't had the audiences. They haven't been selling out And only the fact that it was a finale this year saw the race day actually sell out. It's 5 hours from Singapore, and they're 2 weeks apart. It's not really a surprise Singapore has cannibalized a lot of their audience.
Well, it's been going for 19 years. It started in 99 for the first race. But, the claims were last season that they were pulling the plug on the Grand Prix because they felt that Formula One wasn't exciting anymore and it wasn't drawing in the crowds that they wanted to be drawing in. So they thought, why do we want to spend all this money on holding a Grand Prix that doesn't bring in many crowds, where we can hold MotoGP for less and have a sellout crowd? And I think this year, where the racing's got a lot more exciting, that started to drag them back. So I think possibly they're going to have a bit of a rethink and think, well, actually, this season's been quite good. We might think about bringing it back.
It was around $67 million a year for the Malaysian government to help bankroll the Sepang GP. And I've just been reading an article that the CEO of the circuit, Razlan Razali, has said that it will be at least 5 years before Malaysia actually even considers bringing back the race. So there is hope. I don't want it to become the proverbial white elephant.
And Matt, why are the team principals so annoyed at Renault?
Yeah, well, this was a hard one because every time you thought you had a headline, a new one popped up. And this is because Marcin Budkowski, who was in the FIA's technical division and basically had been tapped to be the next Charlie Whiting, the person that all the teams went to, the person who went to all the teams' wind tunnels, the person who knew what they were going to be developing for next season based on the regulations. With immediate effect, resigned from the FIA and is on gardening leave for 3 months. And this is potentially an interesting problem because he's got all of that knowledge in his head. And just to point out to the listeners, he came from being a tech chief at McLaren and in a technical department from at least one other team as well. So he's a proper person who understands what he's looking at, not just a general executive or manager. And it's theoretically possible we could see him in 3 months' time at a Formula One team, knowing what everybody is up to for next season. And yeah, I'm not sure if they're angry because all of their secrets might have been, so to speak, I don't want to say stolen, but, basically revealed most unfortuitously, or if they're angry because they didn't think of it first and or offer enough cash. It's going to be one or the other. But yeah, that's a huge thing. And it's a real issue for the FIA too, in terms of the continued carping about their governance of the sport, which obviously is going to happen a lot. But nonetheless, normally you'd see like a 12-month gardening leave for someone in a position that sensitive.
It's a clumsy contract if he's only got to do 3 months gardening leave. And also, let's speculate for a second that he was, maybe approached well in position, then had to put his gardening leave in. And you imagine that there will be conversations to some extent happening. I don't know how watertight those things are. It really is like the exam board now coming in to pick out one of the students for special treatment. And if that's allowed to happen, I would say that is nothing short of a scandal, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, actually, we're talking about business where it is a scandal, but over here it makes me think of politics where legislators will immediately go and be hired by lobbying firms where they hang out with their old friends and convince them to vote for things. It's if you're trying to run a sport fairly, it's completely not good that this has happened.
All right, so let's quickly run through what happened in the rest of qualifying. I think the key things were, of course, that Vettel was out with a turbo issue. I think we will refer to Summers midweek in a Wafflecast to get some more details on that. But obviously he's out, so then the battle was left up front. And here is I think, one of the key failures that Ferrari have done in re-signing Kimi Räikkönen is when Sebastian Vettel was not available to qualify. Kimi put it really, really close to that pole position, but you've got to think that car had a pole in it. So that's the price of keeping Kimi Räikkönen and keeping Sebastian Vettel happy with that kind of number 2. There was a setup issue between Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. They tried a new setup. It wasn't working. Lewis Hamilton's side of the garage switches to the old setup, and that seems to do him better in qualifying. And Bottas, in an interview, rues that he didn't go back to that old setup. So that might go some way to explaining the 0.68 gap or something between the two of them. Then crucially, Max Verstappen outqualifies Ricciardo, as he has done quite a lot this season. And we'll talk more about what Ricciardo has to do to combat that later on in the show. But that brings us to the start of the race. So as we always do, we ask Matt to tell us where the race was won and lost. But before we start that, we have a few key questions to frame the expertise that Matt is about to lay out on us. So what we're looking at, with Kimi Räikkönen out, I think again with a turbo issue, and an empty grid slot on the number 2 grid slot, we were left with how far will Sebastian Vettel climb from the back? And could Lewis hold off the Red Bulls when they hadn't shown any kind of race pace? And then I think the third crucial question we were all thinking is, when would Max Verstappen's engine blow up?
Well, yeah, you were thinking, what's going to go wrong this time? Here he is. And the thing is, it's almost like, I don't know, in Mario Kart, when you have the thundercloud and you bump into the other person and that person has the thundercloud. Well, I think this must have happened between Verstappen and Räikkönen, because Räikkönen on his reconnaissance lap reported a total lack of power, and it was furious work on the grid for the mechanics, and then they just wheeled him off out of the second position. And I think the other thing that wound up being very important was qualifying. If you qualified with an odd number, you had a huge advantage today.
Why is that?
Because the grandstands essentially kept that side of the track from getting very wet. There was a big rainstorm about 90 minutes before the race. So you had very, very little traction if you were starting on the even side of the grid. And that was a big advantage for Verstappen and a big disadvantage for Ricciardo. And remember, Bottas started P5. This also had a lot to do with his initial forward movement and really set Ricciardo up to have a lot of issues and kept him from being able to challenge. He might have had the race pace to challenge Verstappen, but we'll never know because he was on the even side of the grid.
Yeah, but crucially, I mean, we'll go back to that grid thing. Crucially, when Verstappen had a Mercedes in front of him blocking his progress, Verstappen made a very, very brave move, whereas Ricciardo was stuck for a lot longer behind Bottas.
Verstappen had a championship leading Mercedes in front of him, and he bombed it up the inside into turn 1. Hamilton, showing his maturity and experience, took half a look in his mirrors and said, I'm not even going to bother. I'm not even going to bother.
I mean, it was a good move, Ryan, because from both of them, Hamilton knows he's in a title fight and that Max isn't in a title fight, but it would be interesting to see next season in exactly the same scenario, would that have been defended a lot more fiercely if Verstappen and Lewis have the title to fight for?
Well, I think, yeah, he would have definitely put on a bit more of a show for us if it was for championship position or places where, you know, you sort of think, well, this kid's had a bit of bad luck this year. We'll just let him go. You know, Vettel's down the road behind. I don't really need to worry. No. I've got 30 odd points ahead of Vettel. I don't think he really needed to worry about it and put any effort in. He just needed to race his race.
Absolutely. And yeah, so it's worked out and he's quickly done the maths versus risk and reward. Perhaps Vettel might have done the same thing at the beginning in Singapore, defending so hard against Max Verstappen coming up the inside. But obviously, you know, Matt, you know me, I wanted Lewis Hamilton to go off and create a lead at the beginning, but he was unable to do so because of these D rates. We hear D rates quite a lot. That is to do with them running out of the battery power.
Right. In other words, this was all due to how Mercedes programs the car to start, which is they fully discharge the battery in the opening stages of the race. And then they need to top it fully back up. And that takes a couple of laps. And the more flowing and open the track is, the more you're going to be taking that energy from the turbo, which is going to be a more noticeable loss of power for the driver. And these are engine states that are programmed. in, and they knew this was going to happen. But what was interesting, and I think what really points out how far behind Mercedes was this week, is despite having that engine advantage, he put no time into Verstappen at all. And even post-race, Verstappen was like, yeah, I was just basically hanging with him and just biding my time. And without a full battery, he was never going to be able to defend against the DRS of Verstappen. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Verstappen got the DRS and the job was done.
Manolo in the chat room says, why does Matt always say boat ass instead of Bottas?
Well, you should probably know this. There's actually a drinking game, and if I pronounce it any differently than that, nobody gets to put a marker down. So I'm sort of hemmed in regarding that pronunciation.
Absolutely. If you want to join the live chat room, as so many people have today, hello to all of you guys. Go to Missed Apex Podcast on YouTube. In fact, you can go to missedapexpodcast.com/live stream or click the live stream tab. That's probably easier. And that will give you the link to the YouTube channel. Then you click subscribe. And if you want a notification every time we go live, then click the little bell and you will get that. And you will be able to join us on Sundays at 8 p.m. for our race reviews. So yeah, you really think Ricciardo would have had the pace if he had been the one to get off the line and been ahead of Verstappen behind Hamilton?
I think it would have been an amazing battle between the two of them. I think the cars were very, very close. In general, we've seen Ricciardo faster in races and Verstappen faster in qualifying. But we've also not seen Verstappen finish a lot of races. And this actually turned out to be an issue for him in the last 10 laps or so.
Yeah, it's very true because he was on par, I think, with Alonso at one point with the amount of DNFs he had in consecutive races. I think Spa was one of them, where a lot of his fellow countrymen had actually come to support him and still stayed and watched the race. But yeah, Verstappen's needed to have the lady luck on his side, and I think he definitely had that today with the pace that both him and Ricciardo were both showing.
And I'll tell you what then, I now worry a little bit for Ricciardo. He seemed to take it in really good stride, but he had to be sitting there, obviously in third place, looking across at a Red Bull driver on the top step thinking he could have had that. And the thing is, when Ricciardo has won this season, it's been kind of, due to attrition and, like big slices of luck, like Baku. But this was a Red Bull victory on merit, Matt, and he wasn't able to be the one that's got to be hurting.
Oh, yeah. Well, it always does. But drivers are very, and professional athletes in general tend to think a little bit differently than you or I. He would have looked at the start and known that if he extracted everything he could have from the car and his position that day, and he'll be looking at how to qualify better, would be my guess.
That's got to be the key here. So a little bit more about, how the race developed, because I don't think Hamilton had any kind of response whatsoever for Verstappen. So what it became a battle of then was, could he hold off the incoming third place car, and would Vettel become a threat towards the end of the race? And also Ricciardo had his own little battle between could he catch Hamilton and initially getting past Bottas with a great little battle, actually, a 4-turn battle scrap to get past Bottas. And what really impressed me about that is these are two of the, if not out and out quickest guys, these are two of the best wheel-to-wheel combat drivers, I think, on the grid.
Yeah, and they have a history that stretches back to the juniors, by the way. They've been racing each other for a while and making it fun. I think the Bottas thing was done from the moment Ricciardo was behind him. I think the Red Bull was just a superior car, and especially superior to Bottas with the updates on his car and the car having huge amounts of understeer dialed into it to protect the rear tires, which is what Toto Wolff said after the race had happened. So the car simply was not handling well at all. I think it was a foregone conclusion, but the time it took Ricciardo to get past Bottas basically put Hamilton out of reach unless he had spun or had a big off.
Interesting that Bottas really didn't have the pace today. I know we're going to say he had a bit of a setup issue, but I think generally we've seen as Tortugadorada says in the chat room, Bottas is just much slower than Lewis, but many pluses faster than Massa, which kind of illustrates the situation that Williams are finding themselves in. And he states they should get someone like Kubica for next year. But they definitely need a good driver. And yeah, comparing those step-by-step driver comparisons really does highlight why Williams is struggling a little bit this year. So then we're left really with Vettel and how much damage limitation he could do coming up the field. It probably did one place better because of his own teammate coming out. Now, we've seen Ferrari crack open gearboxes for Massa to let Alonso get another grid spot. Is it possible? In fact, I'm going to say it definitely is the case that Ferrari sabotaged Kimi Raikkonen's car because they thought he's useless anyway. He's not going to hold off any of the other guys. All he's doing is taking up a space that Vettel will eventually need to take.
Yeah, clearly that's exactly what happened. Or Raikkonen suffered the exact same problem that Vettel had the day before with his turbo, which is a leak in the manifold. And they think it happened in the factory when they were screwing it all together. Even though they test them before they go out, it appeared to be the only word I heard mentioned on air was turbo when they talked about what the issue with Kimi's car is. So this looks like this might be a manufacturing or process problem that they're going to want to get on top of because it completely messed up their weekend in terms of where, if you look at Vettel, where he might have been versus where he wound up.
Let's talk to our panel. Let me introduce you, people, to my friend, Alex Goldschmidt. He's not just a Formula One fan. He likes the kind of racing where the cars are all protected from the rain and the sun. And he does a podcast all about those kind of cars called Raise the Roof, part of Downforce UK. How's that going, Alex?
It's been on hiatus at the moment, if I'm completely honest. A new type of Race the Roof show will be coming next year. We've just had the season finale at some place in Kent that Formula One used to race at, but you might not be interested in that if you're not a tin type guy like myself. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of other things, including commentary as well. I've got 3 weekends this month to do, starting next week at Rye House, where a certain Mr. Hamilton cut his teeth. So looking forward to that. And also doing some work with Daytona Motorsport as well.
Did Lewis Hamilton really start racing at Rye House? They barely ever mention it, but it is good to hear your voice as part of commentary. You're a great podcaster, Alex. We do like having you on here because you are not just a motorsports fan, but you are a communicator. So thank you for giving up time today for Missed Apex Podcast.
No problem at all, Spanners. Always happy to help.
And we have Ryan Ferris, who we haven't seen here for a little while because, I don't know, should we say, did a wall come and hit your car mysteriously?
This van just randomly appeared out of nowhere, like poof.
Whose fault was it? Whose fault was it?
I reckon it was Villeneuve. It's always Villeneuve's fault.
It's good to see you, Ryan. Are you doing any commentary this year?
No, sadly that's sort of been put on hold, and hopefully something will come next year. But no, fingers crossed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. Okay, what I want to ask the panel in general now is this tactic of when you end up at the back of the grid, you have a penalty, to necessarily always, they seem to go for the harder tyre. So they seem to instinctively switch today to the soft tyre for Vettel coming out the back. Now, I would be curious what you think, Matt, of where he would have been if he had just put the softest possible compound tyre on, because he got held up a lot in that early part of the race. He got held up by Fernando Alonso, who perhaps wasn't having the most competitive weekend of his career. And so I'm just wondering, it flatters to deceive, that tactic. It always makes you think, well, he's got these soft tyre stints at the end. They come out, they're super, super fast for maybe 10 laps, and then their race goes to tatters. And so often we see them not being able to take advantage of that initial grip and then see the challenge fade. Right.
Well, the issue would have been worse if he'd been on softer tires, in my opinion, because you're racing through traffic. And really, I say that it depends on the operating window of the particular tire you're talking about. In this case, the soft tire, I believe, had a wider operating window than the Super. I think the Super has a pretty narrow one, although if I'm wrong, I'm sure everybody will tell me about it on Monday. And the reason you run that hard tire is you expect people on the softer tire to pit out of the way from you and give you a stint in relatively free air where you can run fast. And this actually worked out pretty well for Vettel today, I think. even though he got hung up behind Alonso, he was able to go, he basically made up the ground. I mean, he got up to P12 straight away, but he was able to be more racy because he had more tires to work with as he got closer and closer to the front and waited for people to get out of his way.
See, did you have something on that, Ryan?
Well, yeah, obviously, sort of what Matt said, the fact that the softer tyre can run less laps usually than the harder tyre. But also, obviously, if you're coming through the pack, you're going to be expecting to be in a lot of people's dirty air, which could potentially, put a bit more wear and strain on the tyres. So if you're going with the softer tyre, it means that you can find yourself going through the pack and not having to worry so much about your tyre degradation, unlike if you're on the softer tyre.
One of the other historical things we have to remember about Ferrari is that they have always been very, very kind to their tyres, especially the soft compounds. We saw that in the Alonso era as well, until he decided to join Honda. But yeah, Ferrari have been known to keep the soft tyres very well, and it showed in terms of the pace that Vettel was clearly indicating from when he switched to it.
See, yeah, I want to kind of focus on that because I've heard people online saying, look how fast Vettel was coming up at the end. Look how he slashed the initial gap from 30 seconds to 13 seconds on Lewis Hamilton. And this is an indication, seemingly, according to people, that this means Ferrari had an amazing, spectacular package today and that they were only robbed by being at the back of the grid. But this is where I think that reverse tyre strategy can be deceiving. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton had given up on the gap in front and was managing the gap behind. So, Matt, I'm not convinced, although Mercedes did definitely struggle this weekend, I'm not convinced that the Ferrari was as spectacular as it flattered to look, halfway through the race.
Well, you're correct in that we got a better sense of Vettel's pace because he ran that reverse strategy. So as the car got lighter and he pitted around lap 27, 28, same time roughly as Hamilton did, if I'm remembering correctly, he was going onto the super soft tires, which were faster tires on a lighter car. So he was going to look faster. You are not wrong about that. Yes. However, I just have to go back to qualifying and look at how close Raikkonen was to Hamilton to say, you could call it Mercedes getting worse. You could call it Ferrari getting better, but it amounts to the same thing. I think either Red Bull or Ferrari had the best car this weekend. And like I said, thanks to the penalty, we won't know. But I think that's where the race really was today.
So I forget which way round it is because James Funnell has said Mercedes just don't like the hot and humid circuits. Is it when it's hot, Mercedes struggle, or the other way round? I think Mercedes like it when it's a bit cooler.
Yeah, they have ever since Braun was in charge, and even before they started winning the championships, tires and overheating tires has been an issue for the car. And it seems to be coming back on them. They were sort of managing it better the last couple of years. And this is also bringing up some interesting questions because, of course, we're beginning perhaps to see the hand of James Allison in the design and not Paddy Lowe. And so is this maybe part of what's going on? And the other thing that I know we didn't talk about, but has come up in the chat room, so I'll just give it a quick nod, but not long enough to put you to sleep, was that the discrepancy between the front and rear tire pressures was as large as we've seen it all season long. And it was 1.5 pounds bigger than we've seen it all season long. So it was very significant and, in my opinion, had a lot to do with some of the struggles Mercedes had.
And by hook or by crook, we will get Summers on this week to explain that. But he just left me a quick voice note. Do you want to play that, Matt? A little bit of a short explanation of some of these issues.
Well, I think you should probably play it, but I would love to hear it. Yes.
Hi, guys. Sorry I couldn't be on the show, but I thought it'd be nice to shed some light on a reason why Mercedes might have lacked a little pace in Malaysia. I'll try and keep it short spanners as it's tyre related, and we don't want you to nod off. But there is a bit of a history lesson first as well. We have to have a quick check back at Silverstone 2013. You know, that famous incident where the tyres started exploding and Pirelli got all the blame. Well, yeah, it wasn't actually all their fault because the teams were actually swapping the direction of the tyres from left to right to gain some advantages. A rather underreported situation, but it also led to the FIA giving them a bit more control over the setup parameters from then onwards. So they have a bit more control now. They're able to tell the teams the maximum amount or minimum amount of camber angle. They're also allowed to tell them what tyre pressures to run at, something which is quite important when we look at what was going on in Malaysia. This year, so far, circuits like Silverstone, Spa and Monza have given the largest offset or delta between the front and rear tyres, which is 2 psi. However, with a mix of low and high speed corners in Malaysia, Pirelli opted to drastically widen that window to 3.5 psi, which was 21.5 at the front and 18 at the rear. Now, the idea is actually quite sound, as it gives the teams a little bit more tractability for the low-speed corners when downforce plays less of a role, much like when the rear tyre pressures have been low before at street circuits like Singapore or Hungary or Baku, all the circuits and basically where Mercedes have struggled. Now, Toto is often quipped about the W8 being a bit of a diva, but he was also quick to assert that rather than being solely their update package or a baked-in disadvantage from their low-rake, long-wheelbase philosophy, it was a fundamental issue, bringing us back to the tyre pressures. To pinch Toto's words, I think fundamentally the way in which the W8 is set up does not lend to the low-speed transition from what we traditionally call the mechanical grip from the tyre to aerodynamic grip from extra downforce. The issue is compounded by the way in which the tyre deforms at lower pressures, with the sidewalls moving around and often making the tyre deform in a way in which is difficult for the aero to platform to work effectively. It changes the wake that the tyre generates and prolongs this aero agony that the teams want stability from.
It's nearly finished.
Anyway, I guess Spanners has almost fallen asleep by now,
Yep.
And I'll get back in my box and hope that helps to explain where maybe some of the pace from Mercedes went missing.
Oh my God, this is so boring. I have no idea what he said. That is the least interesting voice in the world. You do this for an hour on Tech Time. That was just 3 minutes.
Yeah, but I pay attention, and it is interesting. It's fundamentally interesting. It's so much knowledge packed up into that tasty little treat right there. I'm surprised you're so dismissive of it.
Whatever.
Actually,
We'll set a Tech
I
Time
think
up.
I saw his eyes glaze over at least 3 times.
Do you want to play a game? I call it...
Whose fault is it?
Yay! I love apportioning blame. I found that habit, from my lovely wife. She has to apportion blame to everything. I often give the example of the water-wife paradox. If I leave a glass of water on the floor in front of me, because I like to sit on the floor while I watch movies, and she knocks it over, she says, "You idiot! Who would leave a glass there?" Now, if she was to leave a glass of water on the floor in the same position and I was to knock it over, she would say, "You idiot! Watch where you're going. Why wouldn't you look where you put your feet?" And that's the kind of blame culture I've come to love and appreciate. So, we always assign blame. There is no racing incidents here in the court of Missed Apex podcast. So, the first one that I've got to start with is just the most bizarre one, Alex. I'll give it to you. It is the Stroll-Vettel crash. After the race, it was done and dusted. I got quite excited because I am cheering on Lewis Hamilton for the championship this year. So when I saw a completely suspensionless rear left-hand side of Sebastian Vettel, I got very excited, wondering, had that happened before the flag? Bizarrely, it was after the flag, after the race had finished.
I was just thinking, what the hell has happened? And who has Vettel barged into this time? So, of course, who am I apportioning blame to? Mr. Vettel, because he seems to get off very lightly, and I think Mr. Sanson, if he was here with us this evening, would have ripped him a new one. And I'm going to really actually say this on Jake's behalf, that Vettel's behaviour in the last 18 months, remember Baku when he drove into Lewis Hamilton under yellow flag conditions, well, did Lance Stroll simply not see him, or did Vettel just decide, well, I need to go around this corner, I need to turn left a bit, and I just thought, this is going to be... I saw the replay just before we went on air, and I thought, that looks very, very painful. Because Stroll didn't. I think Stroll probably didn't even notice that Vettel was alongside him, and Vettel's just gone. He's just driven into my car, and then Stroll responds with, "So I'm blaming Vettel.
You're blaming Vettel.
I'm going to blame Vettel.
Matt, let's hear from you.
Before, it can happen again.
Let's hear from you, and then I've got a very short clip from Bradley Philpott.
Excellent. Well, what I need to say is, and what was left out of the tremendous Alex G's narrative, was that Grosjean was indeed approaching also quickly, and the Stroll had spotted him coming sort of up the inside. So, if anything, he was moving to give Grosjean room to come by, and did not see Vettel on the outside. And to me, like if you look at there's a video from behind the two of them, it's very clear how much steering input Vettel put in versus Stroll. Stroll basically just didn't turn the car to give Grosjean room, but Vettel basically came over almost as if, he expected Stroll to yield the racing line to him or something after the race was over. It was nuts. Why would you get that close to a car after the race is over? I couldn't even begin to understand it. Plus, Stroll is a teenager. I mean, come on. Look at what Ryan just did to his car. I mean, poor Ryan with his accident. It was totally not his fault.
Could have been anyone's fault.
I'm 20. I'm no longer a teenager.
Okay.
How time flies.
A teenager from my point of view. Anyway, you get my point. We have seen Vettel do a number of remarkably low thought maneuvers that have seriously put a dent into his championship hopes. And it's not what you expect from someone of his caliber. I will be obvious, and I will completely and totally and 100% blame him for this incident. And more to the point, what we don't know yet is whether or not he's going to get a gearbox penalty out of it.
The chat room, I love you, chat room. Blackout says, Vettel has a habit of turning left more than he needs to in recent weeks. Baha says that transmission didn't seem in good condition. That's a 5-place grid penalty for Japan. Well, it might be. Apparently they're investigating it. And James Funnell has made just about the best comment on this subject, which is they should just follow one another. Just at the end. That makes sense. Just follow each other in, lads. Let's hear what Bradley had to say.
So after the race had finished at Malaysia and the guys were all slowing down, heading back to the pits, we saw another, what's now becoming common, misjudgment from Sebastian Vettel, where certainly from his own onboard camera, it looked like he just turned towards an apex that Lance Stroll was already kind of headed towards. So on the slowing down lap, generally you're picking up rubber, driving slowly, and you don't generally overtake that many cars, to be honest. Most of the time you hold station, and it looks like Sebastian just assumed Lance would dive out of his way or move completely to the inside. You can see from the stills of Sebastian's onboard that he was turning towards Lance. From the onboard camera of the car following those two, it looked like Lance Stroll just basically straightened his wheel a little at the point that Seb was coming around him. But to be completely honest, he'd have no reason to expect...
Oh, I clicked it off. But yeah, he was basically saying he'd have no reason to expect that Sebastian Vettel would be doing that. And then he goes on to, echo your words, Matt, that he had basically ruined his own championship prospects and no one else's. All right, we've got another couple of incidents, actually. It was a surprisingly incident-filled race, although there wasn't too much going on at the front. The midfield battles of late have been really, really entertaining to watch. And those people who switch off when it doesn't look like the leader's going to change are really missing out. Who did we have? We had, firstly, Matt, we had the two Force India guys. That wasn't on my list, but it was quite cool that Ocon was definitely trying very hard not to hit Perez at the beginning.
Yeah, well, of course, and if you imagine the turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 complex that starts the race, basically Ocon was on the damp side, so he was swamped not only by Perez on his left, but also Massa, who I have to say was giving me flashbacks to the year of him and Lewis running into each other today. And it was a sandwich. It was the same sandwich we saw Verstappen in last race. And I think the coaching is getting to him, because instead of turning into Perez, he drifted out into Massa. So clearly the job has been done there and he's learned his lesson. Unfortunately for him, it led to a puncture and a lap 3 pit stop that just basically put him in damage control mode from that point on.
Ryan, Ocon also had another incident with Carlos Sainz. Do you remember that one? And would you apportion blame accordingly?
Well, I think that was Sainz's fault, although France Toss seemed to have some quite interesting argument with Martin Brundle on the Sky feed. But no, you can't just suddenly squeeze someone like that. You're gonna have some sort of incident.
It seemed to me, Matt, that Franz Tots, when he's not reading a Red Bull pre-prepared script, is quite an emotional and passionate guy, and he always fights his corner.
Well, I mean, come on, that's his job. You have to back up your drivers. Otherwise, what kind of a team principal are you? And I don't fault him for that at all. On the whole, yeah, it was a little bit dubious by signs. So I would have to blame him for that. But the best part of the whole thing was the Force India engineer on the radio going, so we saw it looked like signs hit you, right? Signs hit you, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, didn't you see it? And the Force India engineer is like, yes, but you have to whine about it on the radio or else the stewards are not going to investigate it.
Yeah, and
so he said, and so then they investigated it. But
the way he said it was really like salty. And it was the second message from that engineer as well. If anyone in the chat knows who he is, we'll give him a shout out, because with the incident with Perez as well, he was like, Perez basically shoved me into that Williams, and he got the opposite message there, which was, yeah, you could have given that information in the post-race report rather than saying it on the radio. And then the next time he's like, dude, say it on the radio. So Ocon's sitting there like a told off little kid, like, can't get it right.
Yeah, well, it's always the thing. If it's your own teammate, then you say nothing about it. And if it's anybody else, you automatically blame them for it, even if it's totally your fault. It's almost like watching soccer, or I guess football, as you like to call it over there.
We do, because you use your foot. It's crazy. Okay, guys, I just wanted to pause quickly because we don't have an ad this week, but you might have noticed we've run a couple of ad campaigns. We had one with Daytona Karts in Milton Keynes, who looked after us for a great event, hoping to do something similar like that to the future. And then we had one for a game app, which was the Apex Race Manager. So both of those were like quite relevant, and they were things I genuinely would have liked to have heard about on a motorsport podcast. So I'm hoping that they just weren't too obtrusive, and I do want you to know that we are not just taking anyone in. I did have to turn one down. A gambling site came in with quite a big offer, and I've got no objection to gambling in general in the right way. But then I looked on this site, and the kind of gambling that they were encouraging isn't the bits and pieces, adding a bit of fun gambling that I like to do. It was quite, I felt it was quite a negative form of gambling, so I turned that down. So just so you know, I am trying to curate it. I'm trying to do this the right way. But the money from ad revenue does add to our quality, and it does help us improve things. Me and Matt have got quite big plans for what we're doing, especially with Tech Time. We've got some big plans coming up with Downforce Radio, and being able to bankroll the show puts us in a position, Matt, where we can just, we can be ready for any opportunity that comes along.
Yeah, and that's important, and is going to be more important going forward, because we are not done trying to grow this show and grow this audience. And so your support means more and more and more, and lets us make choices that benefit everybody. So we really do appreciate it.
I mean, if you look at most Formula One podcasts, there's some good Formula One podcasts out there, and definitely there's some that if you want something different, another podcast would be your cup of tea. The lads at Norfolk F1, NR F1 Racing, they do a very different kind of show to this. They literally do it in a pub. That's a very good show. F1 Blog do a rundown, team by team, place by place, and they go through every single team. However, they do all just follow this traditional podcasting format. And I think we're trying to move towards what a lot of the American podcasts do, where it's also a video stream. It's also a production. It's also, got lots of input from the community, eventually call-ins and things like that. So that's where we're looking to go. And if you were following the podcast awards that we were nominated for in the top 10, because if you find listeners that went to podcast awards and said that we should be nominated, we got there purely on listener power. However, we didn't win. The winners were a fantasy football podcast who are huge. Are you calling a conspiracy, Matt? Should we be angry about it?
Fake news. It was rigged. It was rigged.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not rigged, you see, because I was watching the stream at 2:00 in the morning. And when I saw the acceptance speech of the winning sports category show, they were in a studio. like a TV studio. They were all sat round there together. Their kit was pro. Their approach was professional. And I looked at them and I went, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. But that is an aspiration. And I would like to take us in that direction where we are, definitely focusing on producing a podcast, but also, moving into other areas and improving. So I hope you support us with that. If you want to support us, there are two ways in which you can do it. You could tell everyone. Just tell everyone. When I am finished watching the race, the next thing I do is tune into Missed Apex podcast on my Monday morning commute even. It adds to my Formula One fandom. Or you can support us with real money. If you support content creators on Patreon, then please consider supporting us. Go to missedapexpodcast.com and click on the Support Us tab. The money you are giving us is going all into improving, replacing, maintaining, and growing. And it is given us, Matt, a freedom to dare to think and dare to dream, if that's not too cheesy.
It's cheesy, but it's appropriate.
Excellent. Let's move on then to any other business. No, there was a few more. Whose faults is this as well? Kind of. There was Magnussen and Alonso, because there was contact there and there was a bit of controversy. And I did want to watch this back because Magnussen has a habit of aggressively defending. So I'm trying to decide in my head whether he is a liability or whether this is the kind of fighting we want to see out of our racing drivers. Ryan, are you a fan of Mr. Magnussen? And do you think the weaving he did today was appropriate? He definitely did some weaving.
I don't know. Some of his stuff, it is borderline, the stuff that he does. And on the odd occasion, it is a bit too far. But, it's what adds to the entertainment factor of the racing. You want to watch a bit of wheel banging. In fact, you go back to Ricciardo and Vettel back in China, where Ricciardo purposely gave Vettel a bit of a bump just to add a bit of entertainment factor to what was a boring race at the time. But I don't know, I think it's let them race, but I think Mag needs to toe down a little bit.
Really? Do you think that, Goldie? Do you think he needs to tone down a little bit? And what of Alonso's clear punishment at the exit of turn 2? He just opened that steering up and there was no doubt what he was doing, was there?
Yeah, that was telegraphed like a good one, I have to say. But yeah, I mean, you need some hard charges in any form of motorsport, including Formula One. Okay, yeah. Fair, it does say that K-Mag is a bit borderline, but we do see some entertaining post-race pen interviews when Hulkenberg's here. Yeah, great for being the most hated guy in Formula One, and then throws that particular comment to the German. But yeah, I mean, you need hard charges in racing, but there's sometimes that you can have where they do step over that line, and Kevin is going a bit too close to it.
But but Matt, if we are going to berate Sebastian Vettel for his actions in Baku, the revenge punt, I know this was a lot quicker, but are we not going to condemn Alonso for what was clearly revenge contact? He was showing him that was out of order. I'm irritated. Here's my annoyance in the form of physical and deliberate contact between our cars.
Yeah. Well, and this is the fine line that you start to draw. First of all, I have no problem with Magnussen and what he did. He did nothing that Alonso hasn't done 1,000 times. The only difference is he doesn't have a championship to get him to make it okay. So I'm just going to get that out. That's my point of view. I like Magnussen. He drives hard. He drives as far and maybe slightly farther than he thinks the rules allowed. That's what makes the racing fun for us, kids.
Yes.
So let's not lose sight of that fact. As far as Alonso goes, well, these drivers, they bump each other. The big difference is they were racing and it wasn't a safety car. That's what I would say.
Yeah, you're right, I suppose.
And to me, that makes it a categorically different thing. If it was really obviously intentional, if he was on one side of the track and just basically made a left-hand turn into him, that's a different story. But it was an inevitable outcome of the racing decisions they made. So I don't have a problem with the contact at all.
Let's just say quickly, the chat room is saying, Dom says, my issue with K-Mag is that he's willing to dish it out, but he won't take it. I've heard that somewhere. Steve says K-Mag's defending is fine, but he has to stop whining about everyone else if he's going to do it. Baha says K-Mag is a dirty driver. Look at Singapore, Hungary. It's very dirty. Ooh, Hungary, that was up against Hulkenberg. Yeah, that was a little bit emotional. Somebody's telling me who the race engineer is. Ah, yes, Steve again. Bradley Joyce is Ocon's race engineer. Bradley Joyce, a tip of the hat to you. You might even get an award at the end of the show. Ryan.
Yeah, well, I think the reason why the contact was caused was because obviously K-Mag really squeezed Alonso into that turn 2, and I don't even think Alonso could have possibly made that corner anyway. He was going to just understeer straight on even if he tried. So contact was going to happen, deliberate or not, because of the tightness of how Alonso was going to have to take the corner.
Cool. And then Alonso followed it with, what an idiot. Hulkenberg is right. And I just think Alonso is on point with the tone of Formula One. And what I mean is, I imagine Lewis Hamilton, if there's something particularly interesting, his people will probably tell him, oh, there's this meme or this trend. I kind of get the feeling that Alonso is on his personal phone following these things. And I would not be surprised. In fact, I will bet money that Fernando Alonso has a fake Twitter account or a fake Reddit account, Ryan, and that he sits there and joins in the debates and arguments.
Yeah, and also another one of the thing was obviously later on into the race, he allegedly held up Vettel in his scrap against Ricciardo. And when he was asked about it in the media pen, he's like, so what do you think about holding up Vettel? He's like, I don't know. I'm just guessing he was just shouting blue flag, flag. But you know.
Yeah, so he's aware of that meme and aware of that trend. Yeah, and and that's the chat room saying like he's a troll. And I think because he's been in this position where he's not really challenging, he's absorbed himself into a different side of F1. I get the feeling he is a fan of F1, and yeah, he'll sit there and troll the other drivers. But a bit rich, wasn't it, Matt, of Sebastian Vettel to start, accusing people of pulling fast ones, because he's done the odd thing himself.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, but this is true of all champions, isn't it? Anything they are playing for maximum advantage at all times.
Dom in the chat room says, "Hi Spanners, you rumbled me. Regards, Nando. Kiss kiss." So there you go. I was right. He's here in the Missed Apex chat room. I think we are approaching the back end of our show. It's been a great race review, and I think we are going to follow it up in the week with some kind of trumpets time, Matt, or a waffle cast, or what are we calling these things? A tech time?
I don't know what we're calling them exactly. And yeah, scheduling is tight this week, but if we have availability, it will happen.
Okay, and Eve, look, I'll do this for you listeners because I love you and because I am kind. If Matt can't make it, I will sit in the shed and I will hit record and I will ask the questions that Trumpets tells me that I should ask Summers. All right, so we'll just get somebody to wake me up I will know that when Summers stops talking, that was the end of the explanation, and then I will ask the next thing Matt has written down. Does that sound about right?
Sounds good.
Any other business? What have you put there at the top about Schmidt Mondel's Allison?
Yeah, this is a question from the chat room. Allison not being missed at Ferrari with the development being so good this year. Never seen this type of development from Ferrari. Please comment.
And with it going downhill at Mercedes at the same point. Is that...
Well, this is always the thing with these tech directors. Are they helping or hindering? Like, what is the story? Because is this Marchione kicking butt and taking names? Where is this pace of development coming from, and why didn't we see it when Allison was there? Although to be fair, Allison's stint there was marred by a great deal of tragedy, and I don't believe he was all that involved. It is quite the thing, and the Ferrari fans are saying that they're not missing Allison at all, but Allison has moved to Mercedes, and so then the next question is, how's that working out for them?
See, I don't think we need to panic about Mercedes form, Alex. People are saying that Mercedes are on the wane this season, or that Ferrari are in the ascendancy, but have they not been saying that all season? Yet they are leading the Drivers' Championship by 34 points and the Constructors' Championship by 7,500 points.
Well, it always seems to happen where there's a blip for people at Brackley and Brixworth. But yeah, you're going to find that Lewis Hamilton, like we were talking about earlier with Max Verstappen, who threw it up the inside, on lap 4, Hamilton was always going to use the mature approach of thinking, right, I've got a championship that I'm actually leading now for the first couple of races, in the last couple of races of this season. But what I need to do is make sure that I don't get torpedoed by somebody else trying to throw one up the inside. If I can't take the win, I'll take second. I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, but from a car point of view, Matt, you and me have argued about this tons, haven't we?
Yes.
So look,
and we're going to again, aren't we?
Is it as simple as saying the Ferrari is not as fast as the Mercedes, but they are consistently setting their car up better, and Mercedes have got gremlins they have to deal with? Is it as simple as that? But because I think that Mercedes is still fundamentally the faster car, and that's the car I want for my run-in to the rest of the season.
Right. And I think it's because we have different ideas about what makes the car better. I think the Ferrari extracts closer to 100% of its maximum at a wider range of circuits, but at circuits where Mercedes extracts the same amount, they are faster. How about that?
Yeah, kind of, I guess.
I'm being very boring. I'm being very boring with this, but I see them as fundamentally different types of cars, and they both have their advantages and disadvantages. And the thing at Malaysia, their performance at Malaysia has been the first race where I've truly been surprised and felt like they underperformed relative to the potential of their car at this track. And that, given that Suzuka is coming up, that is a thing that I think you have to be concerned about if you're a Mercedes fan.
Evangelos Etikolaikos in the chat room says, Ferrari versus Mercedes, we simple folk will never know 100%, but us podcast folk will wildly and tiresomely speculate. Bar is saying no, Lewis is flattering the W08. Yeah, and he does, and especially in qualifying, and that's given him an advantage in a lot of races. But I just think fundamentally that Mercedes is the faster race car.
But not in all conditions.
No, that's true. That is true. So we've got a really, really interesting run in now. Ryan, Lewis Hamilton is going to win his first world championship, yes or no? First? Fourth?
As much as it pains me to say it, yes.
Yeah. So I've been doing some maths, Ryan, and I figured out that if Red Bull are back in the ascendancy, as I believe they are, and they're going to get a 1-2 from here till the rest of the season, every race 1-2, and then the Ferraris finish Vettel, Kimi, Vettel, Raikkonen, third and fourth, then Hamilton can finish fifth in every race and still win the championship.
Again, you said about Ricciardo only winning races when there's been some sort of slip up or blip. And effectively, you could say that about Verstappen's win today, because I think if Vettel had started in the position he should have started at and not had his inlet pipe problem in qualifying, then I think with the pace that he showed, Vettel could have walked away with this today, but obviously it was not to be. And so Verstappen was there to pick up the pieces. So yes, they are sort of making a bit of a comeback with these last few rounds.
So in any championship running, I apply the same philosophy I used to when I was a cricket captain in my younger days. And you would look at your score, whatever you had, say you had 200 runs for 3 wickets, and you might be feeling very pleased with yourself, but you always add 2 wickets. You always assume that you're going to lose 2 batsmen in the next 2 balls when you're looking at it. And it's the same with Lewis Hamilton. It's the same throughout watching Formula One. You have to take away a race win's worth of points. And you say, well, how do I feel about that now? So Lewis Hamilton is now 34 points ahead. Is that right, Matt? Yeah.
Yeah.
So take 25 points off that. The lead is now 9 points. How do I feel about that? Well, I'm still not super confident. So I think it's still all to play for. We can easily have another Malaysia 2016.
Yeah, and this is where the mechanics of Vettel's penalty get interesting, because he now has a whole extra power unit to play with as well that he can employ without penalty. So if anything does go wrong at Mercedes and they're starting from the back of the grid, the reliability is now kind of been put back on them a little bit by the stratagem of putting a whole new engine in for today's race.
But Alex, we cannot get away from the fact that this was a fantastic day for the Dutch fans, the Verstappen Foci, a great win for young Max Verstappen and fully earned.
And on his 20th birthday, no less, as well. I also caught an eye of a glimpse of a the Dutch Formula One broadcasters, Ziggo Sport, and they had 4 of their panelists, including Tom Coronel, putting his head through the polystyrene ceiling when he crossed the finish line, which was very, very entertaining. And it also included Formula One alumni and ran into other things now, Mr. Robert Dornbos.
That has got to be my thing of the week, because it was sort of, they were getting excited, and then the moment he crosses the line, they're jumping around, get on the sofa, jump, and then all of them put their heads through the ceiling. I think that was just hilarious.
That takes us to the podium, kids. I wonder what Ryan's going to pick for thing of the week. I suppose we should go to him. Sigh. Ryan, what's your thing of the week?
Well, I could say that, but, I'm going to put something else in, and I'm going to...
It's going to freeze. No, you've frozen. You've broken up, and I'm just going to assume that you did say that thing you said before. Matt, what's your thing of the week?
Stoffel Van Dorn and the Honda engine.
The Honda engine?
Because they qualified really high on a track that they should have been terrible at. And Alonso had the updates, and Van Dorn finished ahead of him.
Wait a minute.
Verstappen won, yay Dutch fans, but I'm just going to point out Stoffel did a pretty good job, and you can't put it down to the chassis being great and the engine being terrible. And just to stick the knife in a little bit further, if you don't mind, before I move on, I will point out too that Carlos Sainz had to retire from the race with engine trouble. Just saying.
Okay, so let's start with, my favorite game, damning with faint praise. Where did Stoffel qualify? 7th?
Yep.
So you're giving Honda credit for giving one of the brightest young stars in Formula One, in allegedly a great chassis, in one of the historically most successful race teams of all time, and you're giving them credit for getting them as high as 7th.
Aside from the Red Bulls, how many Renault engines finished ahead of him? Oh, that's right. Just Perez with a Mercedes. You're welcome.
Look, Evangelos says it perfectly here. Honda takes a not miserable failure as a brilliant success, and that's what you're doing.
I'm saying they had better reliability, and given the fact that McLaren's essentially a midfield team this year, they also had better performance.
Alex Goldschmidt, who is your thing of the weekend?
Well, my thing of the weekend is Toro Rosso signing up Pierre Gasly instead of Daniel Kvyat, because I think Gasly actually did a pretty good job being thrown in at the deep end in his first race. And I'm trying to remember, because he's the first Frenchman, because is Grosjean still racing under a French racing license?
I have no idea.
Wow, you managed to ask a question that even I would have to go look up.
How arrogant is that? Even I would have to go and look. Even I, the great Matt Trumpets.
You know what I'm going to do? I will look at that after the show. But yeah, Pierre Gasly, super sub to Toro Rosso, finishing. Even though he finished down in 15th, he still managed to get the car to the checkered flag. So, Gasly.
He fit in. I think when you bring rookies in, it's the same as the latest Star Trek Discovery that's come in. You don't say, is that good? Is Star Trek Discovery good? Or is it bad? You say, does it fit? Is it part of Star Trek? And it is part of Star Trek. And now I'm used to the weird Klingons and how they look. That's just how they look now. But with Gasly, with a new driver, you come in. Yeah, did he do amazingly? Did he not do amazingly? Did he fit? He did. He fit. He looked like a Grand Prix driver today. Now, you can see a bit of a contrast when Paul di Resta came in. Obviously, he had a lot less preparation and he jumped in. But in that situation, he didn't fit. He didn't seem like a Grand Prix driver in that situation. I'm sure he would have been if he'd have had more practice time, etc., and testing that year. But Gasly fit. So I'm very optimistic about what he can do. And he's only going to get better than his first race. And I think he might be in a similar situation to poor Daniel Ricciardo, because my thing of the weekend is simply Max Verstappen for out-qualifying Ricciardo, being in that position, doing a great move on Lewis Hamilton, having no fear. I'm not going to say no respect, but he had no fear. He's got no fear of anyone. He said, no, I'm going to outbrake Lewis Hamilton, who's quite good on his brakes, who's the championship leader, who's 3-time world champion, and into turn one, and I'm just going to have it. And he did. And I think we're going to see him now rapidly overtaking Danny Ricciardo. And Max Verstappen is not good for Danny Ricciardo's career. All right, cool. We have a bad version of Thing of the Week called...
Oh no, you missed the apex.
Ryan, who missed the apex for you?
Well, I think it was most of the midfield that required a swear jar, because there seemed to be a lot of the F-bomb being dropped and contact being made, and that just it was almost all of them wanted a pony at the same time, but you couldn't have it.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, the radio stuff is really good because we get to see their personalities. And I wonder how many of them talk purely as if they're talking to their engineer or purely as if only the FIA can hear them, or like Fernando Alonso, who speaks as if the entire F1 watching world can hear you. When Fernando Alonso does something on the radio, he's talking to everyone that's listening. He's aware of that audience. Is Kevin Magnussen thinking about that? Is Lewis Hamilton thinking about that? I don't think Lewis Hamilton thinks about that at all. He thinks of, I'm having a chat with Bono and maybe Charlie Whiting can hear. But you're right. They sit and they drop the swear words, and you think it really wouldn't take a lot of effort to get into that mindset of not doing it. It's not actually that difficult. I think most people who've had kids, they start off still continuing to swear as normal. And when they realize that kid can stand up and talk and hear things, you make that switch very, very quickly. Matt Trumpets, who missed the apex for you?
Ooh, this is a really tough one because I want to say Palmer, but given the post-race collision with Vettel, I might have to go that direction. But first, I have to give a nod to the chat room to Dom, who's missed the apex nomination, is the welder at the Sepang International Circuit.
Oh man, Grosjean did not see that coming.
No, nobody did. But wow, spectacular. Anyway, missed the apex. Got to go with Vettel. It's his championship, and he's throwing it away.
I liked your first thought, to be honest. Palmer, don't blame the wind. Don't do that. Think of anything else. It
might have been a dodgy curry from the night before, you know.
It could have been that kind of wind. That's absolutely true. But it is like the David Hay. My toe hurt a bit. That's why I lost the fight. And yeah, that might be true, and it might have affected your mobility. But don't tell everyone that. Come on, Palmer, think of better excuses. And then I think he was probably to blame a bit later on as well when he was involved in an incident. I think he ended up outbraking himself and just careering into, I forget, who did he smash into in the end? I've forgotten. It was probably a Haas. Probably Magnussen. Alex Goldschmidt, who missed the apex for you?
Not any of the drivers in this particular team, but Ferrari. Not just having one with turbo problems, but having one that needs direct assistance off the starting grid in terms of turbo failures. So nice job, Ferrari. If you've dropped the ball on your manifolds, why don't you think about doing something in the first place? So yeah, my nomination goes to Scuderia Ferrari.
Do you envisage that they will sort these problems out for their next race, or do you think it's going to blight them as they go on?
Well, I think the next race is next week, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. How are they going to get that?
Very quick.
Do you reckon that rear suspension thing looks worse than it actually is?
Well, appearances can be deceiving, but who knows? But we know the caliber of Ferrari. They can actually get a car back together pretty quickly, so they'll probably have to freight the chassis over as it is and get it repaired at Suzuka.
But
Ferrari definitely get my nomination on that front, Spanners.
But in that instance, if appearances can be deceiving, doesn't that require a few beers to be drank to get to that point?
No, you're thinking about meeting the future Mrs. Ferret. That's what she will need to do. Okay, the Missed Apex Award for me goes to Massa. Not his fault. I think he's probably just there past his expiration date, but we're probably going to now see Stroll ease past him as he gets into his comfort zone. Oh, I think I'm going to go to Matt for...
Daddy, I want a pony! And I want it now!
Quite a few to choose from, Matt.
Oh my goodness. I really, I'm overwhelmed by the amount of choices. But, yeah, I don't know. Franz Toast wanting Ocon to be guilty for that collision. I think there's your winner right there.
Anyone else?
I'm going to say Vettel again. I've mentioned him once already, but yeah, the outburst when he said, "Oh yeah, Stroll," what was Stroll doing? It's just like Baku all over again, or Sochi. He just never seems to let up. As soon as he thinks it's not his fault, or it is his fault, he still goes on the rampage on the radio expecting a response. And then we had the outburst against Charlie Whiting, let's not forget.
Yeah, Jake Sanson, boss of Downforce UK and host of Pitboard Radio, is into the chat room now saying, Vettel for Pony. Seriously, copper, kettle, black. What an idiot. I think I said it in exactly the way Jake Sanson would say it. Go to Downforce UK to check his show out. It's on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. We were actually, us three, me, Alex and Ryan, were his guests last week. I suggest going back and listening to that on the Downforce UK feed, because that's not a family-friendly show, and we were able to let rip somewhat. So if you want to hear me and Alex and Ryan with the gloves off a little bit, do tune into that. Matt, it is you that is going to award
Comment of the Week
that no one even reminded me of this week. I completely remembered. Who gets it?
Right. Okay. So here we go. I'm scrolling down. Due to our early conversation, we have Dom pointing out that Jaeger bombs are the devil's work.
That's
and
giving away what I did last night.
Sorry. My apologies. Let me do this real quick. Also suggesting that my wife ate my homework when we were discussing the studio setup.
We had Hannah at the beginning of the show that declared Metal Grate 1, Grosjean 0.
Absolutely. And of course, we have winner emeritus Blackout 19 really showing the way this week. Vettel has a habit of turning left more than he needs in recent weeks.
I know we banned him from winning, but that was spectacular.
And also, Force India have started phoning around asking the other teams, have you had an accident that wasn't your fault? Again, Dom comes up. Coaching is a very polite way of describing Force India management physically beating, quote, you must not hit your teammate into their drivers.
It might be tattooed now onto the inside of their eyelids.
Yes, and Blackout 19, again, I think we also need to mention that this is the first race of 2017 that Kvyat managed to have an incident-free weekend.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And I can't remember who said it. It was Neil, wasn't it, in our WhatsApp chat, who said that I've just noticed that every time Kvyat gets demoted, Verstappen wins a race. That's like spooky movement at a distance.
Indeed, it is. It's that quantum entanglement.
That's
yes,
the one.
exactly.
That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, spooky action at a distance. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Evangelos Heteroclitus suddenly shows up with Magnussen changed direction more times than the Greek Prime Minister. A little bit of European Union humor for you there.
It's quite niche.
And our very own Chris Turner says Gasly finished the race without a drink. Even our podcasters can't do that.
How dare you, sir? How dare you? That is true. Right, okay, it's got to be that Force India one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the winner right there.
Who is it, and what was it?
Was that the Dom? Coaching is a very polite way of describing Force India management physically beating, quote, you must not hit your teammate into their drivers.
Dom, you have
Comment of the Week.
Feel free to add that to your Twitter bio. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Subscription. How do you say that word? Hang on, I need a drink. And then it'll be all right. Whatever's in this mystery mug will help. Thanks for listening. Subscription instructions are on the website or at Missed Apex F1 on Twitter. Join us for our race review next weekend, 8 p.m. UK time. And until then, remember that wounds heal, chicks dig scars, and glory lasts forever. This was Missed Apex. Middle-aged men dancing to rock music. We're so with it, Matt.
Apart from Ryan.
I'm 75, have you know.
Having outdated opinions on Formula One and only talking in Senna quotes does not make you mature. That just means you have found illegal streams of old F1.